so much for sticking around till the end. Some fantastic sessions this morning. It's been really exciting to see a number of first-time speakers and people new to the community, which is really what this is all about, because that's how a lot of us got our start, is being new to this and showing up and sharing stuff that we were deeply passionate about. So yeah, it's been really cool to see some and people sharing stuff that they're deeply passionate about. So, right, we're going to be talking about model context protocol. How many of you know what it is? All right, we're off to a good start. How many of you have been hands-on and used it? So, okay, cool. All right, well, before we get into it in detail, ask a question. Think about one of the best parties that you have ever been to in your life. Now, before anybody puts their hand up and says, Nathan, this is a tech conference, we're all introverts here, we don't do parties. Pretend for a moment, I know you've all been to a party at some point in your life, right? And think about the best party you ever went to. What was part of the party? There was music, right? You've got music at your party. Now, generally speaking, you're going to set up a playlist. Now, today we do this in Spotify. I'm old enough that, I'm almost 50, so, parties these days pretty much include, like, my friends and their children and a barbecue and home and in bed by like 8:30. But, 20 years ago when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I could go a little harder, but we didn't have Spotify, and we the 5-disc CD changer was like the business. That was amazing, right? You'd put your music on and play. But amazing parties don't have a playlist, do they? Usually have a DJ, right? You've got this person who is playing the music there with you in this party experience. But it poses a really interesting question. How do we pay these people? Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, literally, they're kind of doing what Spotify does on this thing, right? And yet, there are people, they're like celebrities, right? They get flown all around the world and they go to different nightclubs and they get paid a lot of money to literally do what Spotify is doing on this thing. How do we do that? It's kind of a weird question, isn't it? So this is a video courtesy of, how many of you know Charlie Phipps-Bennett? Anybody? He's an MVP in the UK. He grabbed this video while we were at Power Platform Conference in Vegas. There's something different going on, right? I think we can agree there's something different from Spotify in that video clip. Literally the night he shot that, I woke up the next morning to like 5 missed calls from him, and I was like, okay, Charlie's finally been arrested, but everything was fine. And he wasn't arrested, in case this is being recorded. But I think we know there's something different that's going on in the scene, right? You've got an experience. This isn't just a Spotify playlist. You notice, those of you that recognize the track, that's Animals by Martin Garrix, but that's not what you've heard on Spotify. There's voiceovers, there's different stuff going on. Like, this is an incredible experience. And so let's talk about what that DJ is doing versus what the Spotify machine on your iPhone is doing. So we've got Spotify, we've got our DJ. And all right, they're both playing music, okay? We've said it. There's something very different going on between each of them. So when I'm on Spotify, right, I am limited to that playlist that I've set up, right? I've added tracks to the playlist, and it's pretty much limited to that. Now, Spotify has got some intelligence. It uses some machine learning, and it can kind of figure out my preferences based on what I've listened to in the past, what I've added to the playlist. And so it can kind of do that, but that's really it, right? You pretty much set it up and it's going to loop or shuffle through stuff. DJ is not limited to the playlist. The limits are the DJ's taste, right? Their view of the world. They can change tempos, they can change beats, they can mix stuff together in new and innovative ways as we're experiencing this event with them. All right, what about Spotify? Well, can't really read the room, can it? We can put the music on the playlist at our party, but Spotify can't observe that everybody's kind of hanging around the outside looking at their phones, or it can't observe that everybody's on the dance floor having an awesome time, and it follows up a banger like Animals with like a slow one, and it's like, come on, So it can't really do that. Whereas the DJ can read the room, can see what's going on. They can see what's, they're taking in all these inputs. They're observing what are people doing, how are they responding, and they can adjust in real time. And then Spotify follows a plan, right? It plays the playlist. Now it can play it randomly, but it's going to play the playlist. It's not going to play anything that's not on the playlist, and it's not going to add in anything. Whereas the DJ is following context. They might have a plan in their head for how they're going to get you out on the dance floor, but they're observing what's going on and how people are responding. So that's Spotify versus the DJ. So I think, we get that there's a difference that's going on here. All right. LDR, if you want to have an awesome party, Spotify is going to play music for you, right? The DJ is playing music with you. So Nathan, that's really interesting, and came to learn about Power Platform and agents and model context protocol, and we're starting to wonder how you're going to make that leap. So let's talk about what this means for us in our context. This is the rough draft, so we're still learning this. Basically, Spotify and the DJ are not the same. I think, hopefully I've made the case. Anybody disagree? All right. So let's bring this into our world of Power Platform and Model Context Protocol and Agentic AI. What's this mean for us? Well, with your API and Model Context Protocol, when we compare what they're doing, your API has got a predefined structure when you set it up. If you've ever set up a custom connector in Power Automate, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to tell it you're connecting to this service and you can do this thing or these things and these things only. Right? You are going to ingest a number. You're going to do stuff and you're going to spit out another number. If we give you text, it's going to fail. So we've assumed that context in advance, right? And it can adapt to changing conditions. Let's say it's expecting a decimal and we give it a whole number. It's going to have a problem because we didn't tell it to expect a whole number. Or suddenly it gets a paragraph. Again, it's going to have a problem. It doesn't know what to do with that. So that's the world of the API. It's fairly rigid, fairly static. They're useful, but we've made all those assumptions in advance. Model Context Protocol. You have predefined data and tool sets, right? So it's all set up, and Clive and Rami are going to show you that shortly. What's really clever about it is that it's got an AI model that is determining the meaning and the intent when it's triggered. So when that agent reasons over the input, whether it's a prompt by a user or it is a trigger in an autonomous scenario, it's figuring out, what does this person want? What are they asking me to do? What do I know how to do? And then formulates a plan the same way you and I would when we go to solve a problem. And it's then going to use the tools at its disposal to go and hold it. So it's far less rigid than an API. Basically, can mix and remix its tools and its data sources to basically solve the problem, things that it knows how to do. And so that's what MCP is doing. That's the difference. Any questions on that before I move on? All right, so basically, in brief, API is Spotify. Playing music for you, context is assumed in advance. Model Context Protocol is the DJ. Playing music with us. It is in the moment. It is looking at what it's being asked to do and then using the tools at its disposal to go and do stuff. Then one more thing that I do want to call out, and Elaine just gave us a fantastic session on this in terms of Microsoft's responsible AI. If you want to pass your exams, learn this, because Microsoft are really starting to stress this. But we've got these 6 pillars of responsible AI, and one of the most critical thing that you'll find in all 6 of these is this idea of human in the loop. We don't just turn the AI loose to go do stuff. We need humans validating, verifying. So Elaine talked about this in her presentation. And when we think about the DJ, they're kind of the human in the loop, right? When we use tools like Spotify, there's no human in the loop. It's just going to make assumptions and add stuff to playlists and loop through it. Whereas with the DJ, we've got that human in the loop, that human judgment, that human cognition that's helping to create. So hopefully I've set the scene for what Model Context Protocol is, how it differs from APIs as we know and love them. And I'm going to hand over in just a second to Rami, but I'll just quickly introduce ourselves. So we are three, those guys can spell architect. I don't always spell it so well, but yeah, we're 3 of us are Microsoft MVPs at different partners. And yeah, when we're not speaking, we're usually competing over deals. So
Being Japanese curry.
Yeah, so I'm going to hand over to Rami, and he's going to talk a bit more in detail.
Thank you, Nathan. It's amazing what AI can do. I tried to replicate the look, but it didn't get the data very slow.
We were wondering about that.
Yeah, it's you're looking quite nice in here, Nathan.
AI generated, man, I'll take it.
Yes, exactly. All right, so thanks for the introduction, Nathan. I think it was really good to understand a little bit about sort of the difference between APIs and MCP. And this is something that I struggled with. Even using AI, I tend to start by using the existing APIs, and I build frameworks around using those APIs before I can actually start using the MCP servers. But then as the technology is advancing, then I'm feeling more and more comfortable using MCP. And today I'll be doing a few demos just to show you how capable it is. So the first thing I want to highlight is I'm a by heart .NET developer. Started my career as a developer. I even started like way back with a little bit of Java. And then for a very long time, I was, back in the on-premise days, I used to work with Kelvin. I remember, if you're familiar with the term GAC, then this is how old you would be. Like we had to register DLLs onto the servers and make sure everything is working. So a lot of .NET development and so on. So a lot of my talks are more on the dark side, like the development side of things, as opposed to the business. But then what I've realized is that a lot of the AI capabilities that are happening there, both camps are benefiting from that. And for once, you're looking at everything that we do for customers to improve their life, we can do as vendors and then improve our lives as well. So just out of curiosity, how many consultants do we have in the room? We're about half of the room. But yeah, so that's why I wanted to do the sort of the balance between the two. What I will start with is talking a little bit about how we use it as developers, and then I'll talk about how we can use it for the business side of things. So I'm going to list a few MCP servers that are currently available in the market. So the first one that we will be using quite a lot today is the Dataverse MCP server. And that's, as Nathan described it, it's a tool that gives you access to Dataverse to do lots of things with Dataverse. So, be it querying data, creating records, but now the newer version of the Dataverse MCP server allows you to go and create tables and update the schema and then interrogate that structure and so on, making it really powerful to be able to basically use it as your sidekick on the side that can help you build those applications. Next one is Playwright. Playwright is a testing tool. So in the past, we used things like Easy Repro to do some testing on the Dynamics user interface. We used Selenium as well if it was a little bit more generic. Now Microsoft is pushing for Playwright, which again has its own MCP server capabilities where you can say, hey, I've got a Dynamics implementation over there. And the requirement says that I need to be able to go and create a record. And then when I say that this person is a child, then those fields are going to be mandatory. Go and test it for me. You give that prompt to Playwright MCP server. And because it knows how to connect to Dynamics and how to connect to the portal, it goes and explores. It knows how to get to the landing page. And it realizes, hang on, it's asked me for a login. I'll try to log in here. And then it goes, it looks like it's giving me multiple apps and I need to pick one of them. I know which one to pick. So it picks one of them and it goes, on the left navigation, I can see I can create contacts. And the requirement says I need to create a contact. So I know where to click. You don't have to explicitly tell it what to do, but it will figure it out by itself. And this is where sort of the Playwright MCP server brings its own capabilities. Now, last year when we did the Global Power Platform Bootcamp, we talked about this end-to-end SDLC software development lifecycle using AI. Now, most of the work that we do starts in Azure DevOps, in ADO. So we go and create stories over there. We make sure that those stories are in a state where they can be implemented. Then once we're happy with them, someone picks the story up, reads the story, decides what to do, and then goes and implements it. Well, what if I tell you, you also have an MCP server for Azure DevOps, for ADO? You can go to your prompt and say, hey, story 234, I want you to go and implement that. And it goes, reads the story and realizes, this story is about creating a table. Okay, I can do that. And then it goes and connects to the Dataverse MCP server and then goes and creates the table for you. It goes, do you want tries with that? I can test it as well. So if you want me to introduce like regression testing, I can use the MCP server to do a load of regression testing and then start using that. So now your entire SDLC is powered by AI. But as Elaine was talking in her previous session, it's all about responsible AI and having the human in the loop in the middle that is actually coordinating. So for those of you that have created tables and schemas, and I don't know if you've used Plan Designer. I mean, again, I'm not talking on behalf of Microsoft. I'm talking as an independent who has like an opinion about that. In the Power Platform, if you make a mistake and you go all the way down to building your entire application and realize you've made that mistake, reverting back is not an easy task. And I'll give you an example. You go and create a table and you set the ownership at the organization level as opposed to at the user level. That's a typical mistake. Create the table, you go and create the form, you create the views associated with it. And of course, as lazy consultants, we leave security till the end. In the very end, you're like, I need to do the security and it needs to be locked down at the user level. And you realize, I can't do that because I created it as an organization. Reverting all of that back is a pain because you have to basically delete the entire table and restart your entire work from scratch. Now, sometimes it could be, for example, you created a choice and that choice field, rather than creating it as a global choice field, you created it as a very specific choice field. And then you put it on the form, you put it on the view and all of that. You're like, it's the wrong type. Okay, let me delete it. No, you can't delete it. You have to remove it from the form first. You have to remove it from the view and then you can delete it. And then you have to recreate it and then add it to the form and then add it to the view. So making a mistake when you're relying on AI can be quite costly. And that's why I'm a strong believer of the human in the loop, where you're in charge. You give it a task and you get Dataverse to go and create it, and then you go and visualize what it has done. And if you're happy with it and it's up to your standard, then you move on to the next step of creating it on the form and on the view and so on. So the whole interaction, the way we're building things is going to be different. And I'm going to demonstrate what I think the future might look like, or the way I see it today. That's from a developer's perspective, but also moving on from a business perspective. I'm going to show you how we do that with Copilot Studio. So with Copilot Studio, you can also say, you know what, I don't want to be very declarative. And again, being a dinosaur in the industry, I come from the days when Copilot Studio used to be called PVA. What was it? Power Virtual Agent. And it was basically very similar to Power Automate. So you have to be very descriptive over how you want things to progress. There was a flow, there was a branching, everything was done in a specific way. So we used to be like, it was deterministic in a way. But now, when you're creating an agent, you can just say what you want the agent to do. And it's getting to a point where it's actually quite accurate and reliable in terms of how it's going to behave moving forward. And the good thing is that how does it connect? How does it figure out what to do with the MCP agents or the MCP servers? So you can go and create your Copilot, your agent with Copilot Studio, and you can go and say, and by the way, you've got a tool that can connect with Dataverse. You've got a tool that can connect to Salesforce. You've got a tool that can actually go to DocuSign and then generate a document that needs to be signed and then sent by email. You can just give it like instructions and it will be able to follow them. And I'll demonstrate that. But with that, let me swap to the dev environment. Well, I'll start from scratch, so that's a bit more interesting. So I've got a folder. It's an empty folder that this is Clive's machine. So he created that folder for me. Just a quick tip, and that's probably for the geeks in there. If you want to be in that specific folder on your terminal, then all you have to do is just in the command bar, just type in CMD, and it will understand exactly which folder you're in, and it will automatically open the terminal in there. And then code dot means start VS Code in that specific environment. It's opening it in here. This is Visual Studio Code. So if you've done a bit of development, you are actually familiar with that. You might have seen that. But I'm not going to be doing any like specific development. I just want to show you what it might look like as a technical consultant or as a functional consultant to build solutions moving forward. And it's all going to be focused on that chat area that you have in here, where we're connected. We've got GitHub Copilot connected to our VS Code, so it will understand a natural language as we're interacting with it. And then what I'm going to do is give it a tool, which is the MCP server, to go and connect to Dataverse and start interacting with it. And I'll show you what are the options that we can trigger in there. So the first thing I want to do is connect it to the MCP server. So in order to do that, I have to go to the show and run commands, and then I can click on MCP at server, and I give it an HTTP link. Hopefully I still have it in here. So this is just a sample. It's a Dataverse instance. It's not even Dynamics 365. It's a developer instance, so not a sandbox or production or anything like that. You can get those for free. They don't count towards your storage. You can have up to 3 of them. If you keep using them, they will carry on forever. But if you stop using them after 30 days, they will automatically disable and delete. But if you want to play with Dataverse, this is a good way to start. And then if it's a new tenancy, you can even get trials for Copilot Studio and the AI capabilities. So I strongly recommend that you do that. So this is the link to our instance. So I picked AI New Zealand. CRM6 is the Australian data center. And what you have to do is connect it to the MCP server. So it's API/MCP, and then give it a name. So AI NZ MCP. Press enter, and then I'm going to make it as something specific to the workspace. So it's going to run just on that specific folder as opposed to everywhere in VS Code. So when we're doing that, it's going to try and add it in here. So what you're going to notice is that this is the one that we just created, and it's trying to update the tool. So as Nathan said, when you connect to MCP server, it will have capabilities, or what they call tools. And those capabilities will be like, query data or create data or create a table or something like that. And they have their own language or prompts that will tell the GitHub Copilot exactly what it can do and how it can do it. So it knows how to interact with it. So it should ask me to actually authenticate. So let's see if this is going to work. In here. To authenticate, I'm going to allow it, and I've already logged in, so hopefully it will just start working, and eventually here you go. It's retrieved the list of all the different tools that it has. So it can create records, it can list tables, it can read information, it can even create tables, which is actually quite interesting. And there's another one at the bottom, which is the deleting of the records as well, with deleting of the tables. So when I'm going to say, go and create a record for a contact that has a first name of Nathan and a last name of Rose, then the first thing it's going to do is a table called list, called contact. So it will do a list table. It will go and figure out what are the attributes behind that table, and it will try to do whatever I'm asking it to do. So using the AI NZ MCP server, create a contact with first name Nathan Rose, Nathan, and last name Rose. So let's see how this is going to work. A bit bigger. Right, so the first thing that is it knows a little bit about what it needs to do, so that's because I've used it before, but it directly knew that there is an existing table that is called contacts, and that table does have a first name and a last name, and it can add the information in there. If I'm going to click on allow that, and again, this is the human in the loop. The human in the loop is actually investigating every single command that is going, and then deciding whether this is actually what I want to do or not. Here you go, it created a record with the name Nathan Rose, and it returned the unique identifier of that specific individual. So again, I don't have to be very prescriptive about how I want to do things. I can just tell it to go and do the work for me. Now imagine if you're doing some customization, for example, where they're going to tell you, you've got a choice of age category. And if part of that age category, you are an adult, then we need to make that specific section visible on the form. So think about how you would do it as a consultant, and then think about how AI is going to do it. So as a consultant, you go to the schema, go and figure out which one is age category. It's, let's say, AI _ age category. All right, you open that specific choice. You go and have a look at the choices in there. Which one is age? Age is 100,000,004. You copy that value. You go and start creating your customization. You say if change age category equals 100,000,004, then what is the section called again? Go home, go figure out the schema of that section, copy it in there, and then go and tell your customization to make that specific section visible. There's a lot of backwards and forwards, clicking here and there, where this information should just be available. And then AI really good at figuring that stuff out, especially if it knows how to look for it. When you go to the MCP server and say, hey, if age category equals adult, then go and make section called adult section visible, then it knows how to actually go to the schema. It knows how to figure out what that schema field is called, what the value behind it is, and what the form or the section on the form is called, and puts it all together. So it makes your life much, much easier so that you don't have to do that mundane work yourself anymore. Before I move into the next one, I'm going to, let's have a look at the tools actually. So update table. So update table is basically when you're making an alteration to the table. So the table already exists. You want to add new fields to it, or you want to delete fields. And then you have things like fetch, the fetch query, describe table that will give you the specific schema names and all. There's another one as well. In fact, let me open the browser. Since we're here, let me go to ka.ms/ppack. This is going to take us to the Power Platform Admin Center. And that I do that quite a lot. It's always good to remember the shortcuts. So bit.ly ppmake is the Power Platform Maker experience. And then aka.ms/ppack takes you to the admin center. I just want to show you guys where to configure it and also some of the options that are available in there. So in the environment, you can go manage your environments. This is the AI sandpit that we were in. And under the features that you've got in there, so this is the environment, go to settings. You want to go and have a look at the features that are enabled. So if I go and search for MCP, it's going to be those tick boxes. So if you want to use the MCP server, just make sure that the top one is actually ticked. And this will give you the tools that we're just having a look at, which is, the create tables, create records, and so on. But there's also another one that is the preview version. And so that will give you a little bit of a peek of what Microsoft is working on and what are the new things that will be introduced. And the difference is that rather than using the /API/MCP, you do /API/MCP_preview. And that will give you additional features. Now, just conscious of time, and I know that we're like the barrier between lunch and the end of this conference. I'm not going to go there, so you can try it at home if you want to. But just to give you at a high level, it's starting to introduce some AI features, so prompt features. So the prompts that we're sort of used to in Copilot, where you can go and interact with an agent and then send it a prompt, and we'll go and interpret that prompt and give you an answer. So sort of like using AI with AI to go and generate the stuff that you want. So play around with it and have a look at what it's going to do. So the next one, this is another instance, NZ13, that I'm connecting to. And I'm going to start Copilot Studio. I've got an agent that I've already created, and I'm just going to show you, as I was talking about earlier. So this is now the business side of things, where you don't have to be very prescriptive over what you want to do, but you can just give it some direction and information about what you're trying to do, and it will do it for you. Have a look. You guys familiar with Copilot Studio? Yeah, of course. Right. So if I go to my agent that I created that one yesterday night. There's a few things in here that you can have, like topics, tools, knowledge, and so on. Most of it is empty, except for tools and instead of instructions. So if you go to topics, those are the out-of-the-box ones, right? So I have not created anything new on top of the existing ones. But what I did do is add a tool, which is the MCP server for Dataverse. But then going to this overview section, so if you scroll down, again, no knowledge, connected to the web, but this is not important. No triggers, no agents that it's talking to, no topics, or just the default topics. But if you want to add a tool in here, then this is where you're going to see that there's actually quite a lot of capabilities. So you've got the connectors that we're used to, and those are the same ones that you would use, for example, in Power Automate, and you can create your own custom connectors to connect to other systems, or you can have a look at what MCP servers it's offering. And of course, Dataverse is one of them. But also, if you look at it, as I was talking in the slides, you can connect to Exchange, for example. You can connect to your ERP systems. You can connect to GitHub if you want. And then scrolling down, you've got one for Salesforce, Monday.com. So there's actually quite a lot of capabilities that are available in there, and then they keep adding more and more. And eventually, like it will be so complete, and then you can rely on those MCP servers that you don't need to use the connectors anymore because they're rich enough to do whatever you want. Like, for example, when the Dataverse MCP server first came out, it didn't do anything with schema. Like, oh, this is so limited. So I went and talked to Clive, and I'm like, Clive, hey, let's create our own. And then 2 months later, Microsoft then released the schema capabilities. So it's just a matter of eventually it will be there. But all you have to do is just select it. I selected the MCP server one. It's available in there. It asks you to connect the way you would connect in Power Automate. And then the other thing that I have is if I go to the instructions, just give it a set of instructions. When given a first name and last name, create contact using the MCP tool. Simple as that. I don't know what the schema name behind first name is or the schema name behind last name. I can give it more instructions and say, like, you know, and then take ask for the date of birth and all of that. It will automatically figure out what is the schema that is required, how to connect to it, and how to create the records that we have. In case it doesn't, that's fine. This is why we're the human in the loop. We just go and say, AI will figure it out. We give it a requirement and it will do it. But you go and test it. And you check whether the behavior is actually what you were expecting. And if it's not, then you iterate. This is what AI is all about. Iterating through our prompts, refining them, adding some more instructions just to make sure that it's doing the right thing the next time it's doing that. And I think moving forward, this is what I feel like my job is going to be. I'm going to be a prompt engineer. I'm going to spending hours and hours and hours refining those prompts so that I can go and tell it to go and create something for me. And I know that it will do it correctly because I've trained it to do it correctly. Think of it as, you know, a lawyer. You go to a lawyer, you want to do a will, and they'll charge you $1,000 for a will. You're like, but it's just that one document, right? So it's like, you know, 2 pages, and all I have to do is just fill in the blanks and then sign them down there, and you're charging me $1,000. But that's because they put hours into perfecting that document. So that's what our job is going to be moving forward. Let's put that to the test. I'm going to say in here, so this is the test. I'm agent 2. How can I help? Create a new contact with first name Rami and last name. And again, it will try and figure out that it needs to use the MCP. Here you go. Figure it out that it's the MCP server. It created the contact with first name Rami, last name Mounla, and it figured out what the schema is. You know, you didn't have to be prescriptive about that, and then went and created it with the right ID in here. So if we go to the app, then we'll be able to see it. So again, there will be, moving forward, I think there will be less code that we're going to worry about. There's going to be less customization that we're going to have to think about, and more prompts, more instructions, delegating that to the MCP servers, and then making sure that it is working as expected. As I mentioned, you don't always get what you want out of an MCP server. Sometimes it doesn't do the the schema in our case, like it doesn't create the tables. Then you can go and create your own server, go and create those capabilities. Sometimes just the logic is too complex. To put it all into one prompt is going to be too long. Like, for example, I can think about some of the customers that we work with in the public sector where you submit an application and the application goes through a very deterministic flow, a set of rules that it needs to execute and so on. Now, you don't want to keep it to chance and then give it to AI and say, hey, go and figure out how to approve someone's passport application. I mean, it will try its best, but it's not going to do a good job. Instead, what you want to do is create your own deterministic flow and expose it as a tool that it can be used. Clive, who worked on the Department of Internal Affairs for passport, and that's why I'm giving that example. And every service that you request from the public sector, they start by making sure that you are who you are and you're eligible for that specific service. That's what we call identity proofing. Why not create a tool that would go and do identity proofing as opposed to leave it to chance and AI to go and figure out how to do it? Then you've got a deterministic way of doing it. Then when you say, I want to apply for a passport, it knows I'm going to call that specific tool to do the identity proofing and then start the application processing, which may also be a tool. In order to see how we can do that, I'll hand over to Clive and then he'll help us figure it out.
Thanks. Thanks, Rami. So I'm going to carry on from that and on to my journey through learning how to use MCP and how to bend what my agents can do, using the tools that I can create or the tools that I can get off the shelf from the market. And so I'm just going to start. I'm going to go through these really quickly because I don't want to focus on the slides. Start by just kind of setting the scene about why we use MCP over other alternatives that might be there. And it's the really important thing is about setting the boundaries about who does what and who can do what, right? So the MCP server, it acts as a controlled gateway between the thing making the decisions, the AI, plus me a little bit, and the back-end services that I might have, right? So I don't want to give this powerful machine access to everything that I might have access to, right? So we need to have that controlled boundary, and that boundary is the MCP server. So the MCP server, as we've seen, declares a fixed set of tools, right? So these tools kind of describe themselves. They say, oh, I'm a function. My function takes these inputs and parameters, has a description that lets the thinking tool, the AI, understand what that tool does, and it sets the parameters around how it should be used. And so the key about this is that the AI running in Anthropic server or OpenAI server somewhere, we don't have control over it. It doesn't have any ability to access anything that we have. So it doesn't have our keys. It doesn't have our tokens. It doesn't have anything but the ability to call a function. The MCP client presents the tools to the user, as we've seen, for approval before execution. So the MCP client might be Copilot Studio, or it might be VS Code. And often there'll be human in the loop. Not always. So if there's not a human in the loop, it'll be determined by what tools you've given it access to. So that's one key thing. You don't give it access to something automated that doesn't have a human in the loop. You don't give it access to delete all your tables or to delete all of your data. There was recently a story in the news about a guy using Gemini, and it gave it access to his entire family's archive of photos, and it deleted 15 years worth of family memory. So don't be that guy. Be the guy that uses their tools carefully and only gives this technology access to what it should have access to make you more productive rather than destructive. So the server-side execution in the backend server. So the MCP server does all of these things, right? So it validates the incoming requests from the person, the client, calling the use of the tool. It does the authentication. So the MCP server might be sitting on my laptop, or it might be sitting in my Azure tenant. And so it's my server that I have control over that is actually connecting to the backend services using API keys or managed identity. In my instance, I'm using managed identity. It defines the scopes around what is allowed, and it sanitizes. So it makes sure that the things coming in from the client actually make sense, that I'm going to let that through into my database. So I'm going to let that call through to actually do that input. So yeah, I've talked about the key safety boundaries. So the AI and the LLM can ask for things to be done. So it proposes a tool to be called. The client actually enforces the Are you allowed to call that tool? Am I going to pass that to the server? Am I going to ask for approval? Does my policy allow it? The server does all of the things that I want it to do. It owns the credentials. It controls the interface that the AI has to all of my services. It acts as a proxy, as a boundary between the AI and my backend services. And then the backend services are just as they are. So it might be an API. It might be my laptop. It might be my camera. It might be any one of those things. So what that means in practice is that MCP actually provides the control so that you can trust that AI is going to do only what it can do because you're defining what it can do, right? So the surface area is minimized only by what you put into the tools, what you give it access to through that interface. So a lot of people were talking about there's a new thing that's come out, and it's skills for agents, right? So and I saw some articles that were saying, MCP is dead, skills are going to take over, right? And it's good to understand that skills and MCP are actually two very different, distinct things. So a skill is a process. A skill is how do you do something? So skills might say, get a token using this CLI command. You then use that token to call this endpoint. You then build a script to do something using the response. So a skill is the process, the procedures. A skill might even say call tool A and then call tool B and then call tool C, and how to actually step through the process. You don't want your skills to replace your MCP because you don't want the client having access and doing things that it shouldn't be doing, right? So you don't want your client to be getting a token and then using that token to do whatever it wants with your backend services. You want your MCP client to use your tools where you can dictate what it can do with the backend services. So there's two kind of main ways of actually interacting between an MCP client and an MCP server. So I'm going to show both of them. The one Rami showed before is HTTP, streamable HTTP. And then there's standard I/O. So the standard I/O is the one that's when it's running on my laptop. The MCP client is actually running a program locally, and it's calling the tools directly on the device. HTTP comes with all of the things that you'd expect to get from HTTP. So it can be remote. My server could be in Azure. It could be somewhere else. It could be inside the Dynamics data center. Provides the standard authentication protocols that we would normally use. So it uses OAuth to get a token from the client to make sure that you are allowed to use the server. And it allows many people to connect to it. So when I'm running it on my laptop, only I can use it. But when it's hosted as a remote MCP tool, then anyone that has access to that tool can use it. So an example of one of the tools that I built. So this was before when the Microsoft Dataverse one was not that good, not that developed yet. It wasn't as good as it is now. And one key differentiation with my one is I wanted to use the web API because often when I do things inside Dynamics, I'm doing a flow and I want to be able to I want to know what columns to select. I want to know how to do an expand. Want to be able to build the flow and know that the calls to the flow are going to work. And so earlier this week, my friend Nathan called me and he said, I'm really struggling with expand. I can't get this expand to work.
I'm also embarrassed for me right now.
So I copied what he sent me. Actually, I'm trying this expand on account, transaction currency, whatever. And I just pasted into my chatbot and VS Code with my MCP server running locally. And you can see it's transaction currency. It's made a call by itself. This was the first prompt to my dev instance. And for whatever reason, it knew it should add an ID on the end there. And it gets a response from my environment. You can see, yes, it's managed to do the expand. And it says, yeah, it worked. These accounts use New Zealand dollars. By the way, the transaction currency bit that you gave me is missing the ID. So you've got the wrong navigation property. So it was able to figure out, based on all of its training of Dataverse and the databases and the conventions that should happen with these types of things, that there's probably a mistake with it. It corrected the mistake by itself. It tested out whether it works, and then it gave me very good input about how to actually do it. And then I copied that and sent it back to Nathan and said, I'm a genius.
I agreed.
Yeah, so that's one of the first tools that I built. Here's another one so I've started playing around with in preparation for this. Yeah, excuse the shirt and the expression. Not AI. Yeah, I don't look nearly as good.
Sun's out, guns out.
So something that's cool about MCP and the tools that we can build is I like the idea of thinking about like the reason that we as humans are capable because of the senses that we have, right? We can touch things, we can feel things, we can smell things, we can see things, we can hear things. So for these agents to actually start doing real world things and becoming more capable, we need to give them senses or the ability to connect to senses, right? So one of the tools that I've been playing around with in preparation for this was, can I turn my camera into a tool? So can I turn my home security system and those cameras into tools? And then could I build agents that then use these tools to do cool things? And so you can see it's taken a photo with my webcam, and then it's given me feedback about it. So I can see your desk and you're wearing glasses, a headset and a white tank top. Behind you, there are wooden shelves with books. It's correctly identified the book, Bernie Brown's Dead Lead. It can see the red electric guitar, and it knows that it's a cozy home office. So it's actually got quite a bit of decent insight. Like, I don't think most people would be able to give me as good a review about that photo that it's seen. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if I could build a security system. So if it sees a robber in my house with a balaclava and a gun. I didn't have a balaclava and a gun, but I had my son's water pistol and his beanie. And so it takes another photo. And unfortunately, it's a bit more intelligent than I was hoping. So it didn't recognize a thief breaking into my house and sitting at my desk with a weapon. It recognized that I'm wearing a knitted animal beanie and that I'm holding a blue X-Shot toy blaster. So
Nice try.
too good, almost. So I couldn't test it in the way that I wanted, but it just gives you some insight about if we start building tools like this and give these models the access to the things that we might want them to be able to do. Maybe if it was a real thief with a balaclava and a gun, it might actually have the intelligence to recognize that and then do something off the back of that insight. If I give it the right skills to know if you recognize this, this is what I then want you to do.
I'm free tonight if you want me to test it out. So where do you keep the money?
And then so the next thing I started playing around with was like, oh, well, there's like some public APIs out there. And so I decided to connect a tool to query the NZTA website and go look at the current traffic cameras that they provide for all of the motorways and see if it can start giving me insights about things out in the world. So I created a tool that queries their API, it gets the photo, and then it can give me information about it. So we testing it the other night, and from the photo, there's a little timestamp, so it can recognize the time. It can see the sky and the road conditions, so I can see that it's wet road surface, it's been raining, it's right. It can see the traffic conditions, so it says 4 vehicles in one direction, 5 in the other, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it gets the number of vehicles in each direction, absolutely correct. It can see headlights, so it's recognized, oh, must be nighttime, and visibility is good despite the wet conditions and fading light. Headlights, taillights clearly visible. So I thought that was quite cool, actually, being able to, from an API that provides an image to a model that can think about what it sees in that image to then give insights that I could then do something with. Not quite questions just yet. So I'll quickly show you what it looks like in practice. So similar to what Rami was showing us before, you add the MCP servers as tools here. And so you can see I've got two tools on this one. I've got an Azure function that I've hosted and a local tool using standard IO. So HTTP, standard IO, the two different options that we had. And so the code, actually, I didn't write much, if any, of the code. The code uses the .NET C# SDK for MCP, but there's a TypeScript one, there's a Python one, there's one for literally every language. So you pick and choose where you're going to host it, how you want to host it, what language you want to use, and you can use that SDK. The .NET one I used because it has a library for Azure Functions, which takes care of how it's going to interact in the infrastructure in Azure, how it's going to do authentication, all of that. And so that just comes off the shelf. And the key bits are including the MCP extensions, building the server, 4 lines of code to host the server, adding your clients. So those are the things these are the bits that actually communicate to your backend services. So you get to dictate how it's going to call Dataverse. And so the MCP server accesses my Dataverse or my Power Automate, not the chat window, not the AI. And then the key bits within here are you've got a class and that says I'm MCP tools. And then for each function, you just have it as an MCP server tool. And then the bits that the AI see are the descriptions and the parameters that it can call and what the output is going to be. I can actually show you. The LLM, when the MCP client spools up and goes along and sends a message to the AI, it goes along and says, hey, by the way, I've got these tools. So this is all it sees. So I've got a reader file tool, I've got a MCP server tool, save traffic conditions tool, and then it breaks down each one of the tools to say how that tool should be used. So the search tool should be used like this. So these are the descriptions for each one of the tools. So that's all it knows. There's no tokens in here. There's no information about how to connect to your Dataverse. There's just, these are the functions you can run, and I'll give you some outputs from them. So I'll quickly move on. What's the time? Quickly move on to actually implementing some of these tools a bit broader than just running them locally using standard IO. So deployed them as Azure Functions. So there's two Azure Functions there. One is using OAuth and one is using a function key. And so I won't show you the OAuth one, but basically with the OAuth one, similar to what Rami was showing with Dataverse, with the Microsoft one. So you put in the URL and it says, the client wants to authenticate. And then the client will go along and get you to log into Microsoft. And then that will give it, the client will prove that you've got access to the server to be able to call Dataverse. The function key one is a bit simpler. And the reason I use the function key one is because you can then generate keys for whoever you want to be able to use specific tools. So it gives you the control where I can say, I want Rami is going to have the create schema and the delete table one, but Nathan's only going to have the create schema one.
That was he does.
I don't want Nathan to delete my table. So it gives you that kind of granular control in a very easy to manage way. And so if I open one of these, you can see, similarly to any other function, you've got like a trigger. So like it used to be like, service bus or HTTP or whatever. And now there's an MCP tool trigger. So it's very similar to anyone that's ever done an Azure function before. And so you can connect things like app insights to this function so that you can actually log and monitor exactly what it's doing. Then API keys, you can see I've got a key here that actually dictates how it's going to connect. Something that also show is it's quite interesting is if you ever want to see what is actually happening kind of under the hood, you've got this output window and you can set it to your MCP tools, your MCP. So you can actually see the part called list tools. It did logging. It called this tool specifically. So you can actually see the chain of events that the MCP server is doing. And then if you want to get to, I showed before, which is for this tool call, this is what the LLM sees. You go to the GitHub Copilot chat output window. And in here, you can actually get the markdown files that are going between my laptop and MCP itself. So this is a tool that predicts the next line number that the person's going to want to go to. So if you actually want to see the request and response between my laptop and the LLM, you go have a look at that. So similar to what Rami was showing us with Copilot Studio, I'll just jump to Copilot Studio now. So when you add a tool, all of the ones off the shelf, they just get added kind of like this, like a connector down the bottom. When I add a new one, it actually creates a custom connector. So in the background, there'll be this custom connector. So if you've ever done custom connectors in the Maker, you see there's a custom connector here. That's actually describing the interaction for my MCP server, my HTTP definition as such. That's where you add a new tool. And then the connection to that tool is very similar to the other connection that you might have for like Power Automate. So you can see here, I've got a connection that's connected to my remote MCP server. And that's where I put in my key, or I do my OAuth for me to consent that it should be able to connect to that server. The connectors. So the next bit is like, I won't show Copilot Studio, but there's a bit in here. Yeah. So there's two different agents that I kind of built out of this. So there's one for traffic conditions. And so something that's really useful is a lot of these off-the-shelf MCP servers, they give you access to everything and they're really generic, right? So that can be great if you want it to be variable or you want it to do everything. But the bit that kind of makes that less reliable is the fact that it might not necessarily get things as right as often as you'd want it to. So if you want to build an agent that's not going to have a human in the loop, want to refine it down to only have access to tools that it should be using to deliver the task that that agent's meant to be delivering. So by constraining the tools to do specific things, you'll find that your agents become a lot more reliable. Beyond instructions, I know like the amount of times that I've told an agent not to do something in the instructions, yet it still goes and does it. By kind of getting that balance right between really good instructions and the tools, you'll see in this one, I've actually gone along and turned off half of my tools. So I've got an MCP server that does dozens of things. I only want it to be able to get an image from a URL, and I only want it to be able to save traffic conditions. And then my instructions kind of define what tool to call in which order, so like the skills. And then what output I might want it to have. So Copilot Studio or GitHub Copilot very kindly wrote this for me as far as instructions about how to get an output. And then so I'll show you in action. So I said I loaded Copilot Studio. And so in this instance, this one is actually traffic conditions as an agent. And then if you've ever used the Power Platform, the Power Apps Copilot, you kind of get an agent per app. Then, so this is just a really simple agent that has context of the app that it's in, but then I can add other agents to it. So inside my model-driven app, I've got the generic agent that can do anything that it might want within the app. I've given it another agent that does a very specific thing. And so that in practice is I can say, what's the current traffic conditions? And if I zoom out, gives me pretty much the exact same output, but from today. So it's gone to the ZTA website, it's got the image, it's processed that image as an image type file, it's looked at it, and it's given me the same output. So it says, oh, this is the time, correct? Dry, good conditions. Then the last tool that I've done is I've added a bit so that it can actually save that. So I can ask for traffic conditions, and then it saves that to my database. So I should have one from earlier this morning. It stored the image that it received back and the description that it generated. Then I've got one more. I'll show this. So if you're building MCP servers, something that's really good is this MCP inspector. And I think it's actually like developed and built by the guys that manage the MCP protocol. And so it gives you the ability to connect to your MCP servers, do the authentication. So I've got my header and my function key. It gets you to step through doing the connection. It lets you do what the client's going to do. So every time the client spools up, it's going to list the tools. I can go list tools. I can look at the tools list and I can see it's responded with got activate workflow, compare artifacts, get list. Then the last tool that I built was in a similar fashion. So within a model-driven app, got pipelines out of the box, platform pipelines, and when I deploy solutions, with this, you don't actually know the difference between the two solutions. So there's no unpack, there's no source control, there's just an artifact. And within that, there's a zip file of my managed solution. So I know how to write code that can unpack a solution using the solution packager, and then I could build a tool that compares the what's new, what's been removed, what's changed. And so you can build tools to do specific things like this, where you give it a synopsis of this is the delta, and then AI can go along and format that and present that to you in a way that's easy to consume. And then also potentially then do the next thing, right? So, oh, you've deleted a table. Maybe I should warn somebody about that, right? So the example is compare the latest audit off solutions. So it's because this is an agent inside a model-driven app, it has visibility of the rows in the table. So it knows these are the latest two, version 5 and version 4. It's called my tool to unpack the solution, and the unpack is recognized that I've added a new column to an entity, and I've added a new security role. And then I can say, and version 4 to version 3. And so it's got the artifact for version 4, the artifact for version 3. It's unpacked the two solution files. It's compared all of the files. And then it's given me a report saying, you've got 4 new entities. You've got a new cloud flow. You've got a bunch of new relationships. Yeah, that's quite a cool example of how to start building agents that use MCP tools that you can build, and then actually have them hosted inside Copilot Studio in a place where it's consumable and usable.